Reports by the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, it's first to look at antimicrobial resistance. And I have to be breaking some of these words because they're not my everyday words. Including antibiotic resistance globally reveals that this serious threat is no longer a prediction for the future. It is happening right now in every region of the world and has the potential to affect anyone or any age in any country. So with time, our bodies are resisting the antibiotics, but what's the effect of that? Remember yesterday in our news bulletin, we brought you the story of a man who's gone deaf now because of some antibiotics that he used. I just quickly want to play back that story. And then I'll come back. We'll be joined by Dr. Apia. In fact, I'm being joined by Dr. Apia Koran-Labi, who's a medical microbiologist at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. I'll just start the discussion with him, and then we'll bring back that story to you. We'll take his comment on that. But good morning to you, Doc.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So antibiotics, I mean, they are, what are they really? Then we can follow that up.
Well, antibiotics, I mean, they are drugs in the first place, and they are used in treating infections. Okay, so they have quite a long history. Antibiotics have been with us since the 20th century, actually, from the 1920s. I think that's when Alexander Fleming discovered the first antibiotic, that was penicillin. So it's not been with us for so long. So it's just like from the 20th century. And we use it in fighting infections. So when you have your urinary tract infection, pneumonias, all manner of infections, we fight them with antibiotics. So what we're actually struggling with, antimicrobial agents. I mean, yes, antibiotics are naturally synthesized, how do you call it, agents. And then antimicrobial agents encompass everything, including antibiotics, and then the synthetic forms of synthetic agents that are used for treating infections. Yes.
So what's the difference between antibiotics and the normal painkillers that we're used to?
As you said, they are painkillers. Antibiotics are used for infections. So if you don't have an infection, you don't have a bacterial infection, let me put it that way, bacterial infection, you don't need antibiotics. Okay. So they are different drugs.
But sometimes we use them as painkillers, right?
No, you don't use antibiotics as painkillers. Okay. No.
Okay.
You have paracetamol and all those are painkillers. Antibiotics are antibiotics.
Because I remember that, you know, when you have surgery,
yes,
what they give you, are they antibiotics?
When you have surgery, you get painkillers, but it depends. Okay. It depends on what goes on in the surgery. I mean, at the time of operation, the surgeon may give you antibiotics to prevent infections from developing post-surgery. And also, after the surgery, if you have an infection, you will be given antibiotics. But if you don't have an infection post-surgery, there's no need for you to have antibiotics. But whilst you are on the table, probably you are asleep, you'll be given a shot of antibiotic just to make sure that post-surgery you don't develop any complications. That's with infections, yes. Okay. But mostly you are giving painkillers. Okay, so antibiotics are not given.
Because I thought antibiotics are like stronger versions of painkillers.
No, that's a big misconception.
Okay.
Totally big misconception,
All
yes.
right. So I want us to just play back that man's story who's gone deaf after using some antibiotics, and then we'll come back and then we'll talk to Doc some more.
Al-Hassan Musa looks perfectly normal as he goes about his work that puts food on his table. You just need to go beyond the surface to realize his life is not as peaceful as it may seem. When he was attacked by tuberculosis, everything he valued in his life vanished.
I thought it was malaria, so I started treating malaria. All of a sudden, it couldn't went off, so I went to clinic at Akawi, Ganshaft Municipal Health, and they treat me.
They assess the antibiotic here strictly by prescriptions. That comes from the hospitals. And then sometimes those who come with minor infections like chest infection, coughing, when I am convinced that it is an infection, I give out antibiotics. From my opinion, they don't have any knowledge, a share of knowledge about antibiotic resistance. You can determine that from the way they ask for antibiotics frivolously. They walk in, give me, I want to buy ampicillin. I want to buy a Bombet, white one. If you ask them, what do you want to use it for? They are not willing to tell you. They just want that. Even the antibiotics like chloramphenicol, the white Abombet that they be asking for, it's no longer useful. The resistance is so high. But that is what they think they want to use to treat themselves. For instance, there's a case, a lady came, one of the clients, that she wants ampicillin and penicillin V. They are all antibiotics. For what? She wasn't willing to tell us. But upon further interrogation, trying to ask her to explain the sickness so that we can help her, she said earlier in the morning she took a bus. In the bus, somebody was selling herbal medicine. And the person said, if you have white, you add ampicillin plus penicillin V tablet to it. When you take it, your sickness will go. So I said, oh, this is not right. And I tried to explain to her this type of practices, that's what's leading to resistance. That the medicine that you used to take in the past to help you, this day when you take it, it doesn't work. You have to find yourself in the hospital where they have to give you so many antibiotics before you get well. So she still insisted, and for here our policy is that by the guideline, we don't give out antibiotics just like that. We have to be convinced. So she couldn't get it. But then later on, after 2 hours, she sent another gentleman who came asking for the same medicine. And we still denied the person. And they went close to a chemical shop close to us, and they got it. And they were laughing at us. I said, we didn't know what we are all about. But I can say, since we started working in this community, the message of asking for antibiotic, the way they want it, is no longer, is reducing. It's reducing.
All right, so that's a pharmacist there telling us about what we sought to do was to find out if the drugs can be purchased over the counter. So that's his experience sharing with us. But before that, just a brief on the man who went deaf after taking some antibiotics, and then you were telling me that there's some side effect to antibiotics.
Yes, there are few antibiotics that have got the side effect of, we call it ototoxicity, in that they can affect the ear. And so if it is not given the right doses, can make somebody go deaf. But it's just one class of antibiotics that have that unique side effect. Yes.
Okay. So let's get back to the resistance issue. Why is our body, beginning to resist?
It's not our body that is beginning to resist.
Okay, it's the bacteria, that is getting used to.
Yes, so bacteria is fighting back at us. It's just a normal selection. It's just a natural phenomenon in that just as we would try and preserve our lives, bacteria is also trying to find a way of preserving their lives. And it's something that has been created by man. It's a multifaceted problem.
So, in simple language, they're trying to be smart, we're trying to be smarter.
Yes, so bacteria is just trying to survive. You want to kill it, it's trying to find a way of outwitting you and surviving. So literally we are getting a lot of bacteria which are smarter than the antibiotics that we've already developed. So now our antibiotics are not able to fight them. So that's the whole problem.
Are we not supposed to be ahead of them, in terms of every time trying to develop something new?
Yes, that's well said. The truth about antibiotics is that since the late 80s, no new class of antibiotic has been developed worldwide. Okay, so we are not innovating as a people. If I say as a people, the whole world. Okay, so the big pharmaceutical companies are not really investing in antimicrobial agents anymore. I think it's cost, if not millions or if not billions of dollars, just to develop one class of antimicrobial agent. And then after developing that, how do you call it, you have to market it. But I don't know whether it's economics or whatever, but it looks like most pharmaceutical companies now are targeting their research and development into chronic ailments, diabetes, hypertension, and all of that. Because I think that's where probably it fetches them more money. So we are behind in terms of innovation. So it's one of the problems. And much as we want to look at research and development and then generating new drugs, we must also preserve what we have. Okay, because if we hadn't misused antibiotics the way we have over the past probably 50 years, we would not be where we are today.
How do we abused it? We misused it? How?
Well, I think it's as I said again, it's not one person's doing. It's it's a whole system. I mean, we can start with the individual. Just like the clip we saw that people were going to the pharmacies to buy antibiotics over the counter without prescription.
Shouldn't it be possible?
No. I mean, you're not supposed to buy antibiotics over the counter. And I mean, if you've traveled outside the country, most Ghanaians will tell you that when they go outside the country, they are not able to buy antibiotics because there are policies. You are not supposed to buy antibiotics over the counter. It is not paracetamol. Okay? It is supposed to be bought with prescription. So we have a situation where it's lax. It's not only here. In the third world countries, in a lot of developing countries, you have this phenomenon being pervasive. So that's one problem. People have access to antibiotics when they actually don't need it. Also, I don't know whether I'm sure if I ask how many times you bought antibiotics off the counter when you've had probably a cold or something like that.
I hardly buy anything over the counter without prescription because I make use of my mutual health card.
Okay, so that's a good practice then. But a lot of people would go for an antibiotic when they have a cold, a sniffle, or they start coughing. And most of these coughs and colds are caused by usually viruses. And a lot of people would go to the hospital and would insist.
So, do I get that we're using the antibiotics to cure other things that we should not necessarily use?
In a lot of instances, especially with a lot of upper respiratory tract infections, which typically are caused by viruses. The problem with antibiotic resistance is it's a simple thing. Without the antibiotics, you do not have resistance. See, in every large population of bacteria, which usually will cause infections, there are a few cells that will be resistant or would have resistant genes in them. So if you expose them to the antibiotic over a period of time, it wipes out the susceptible ones or the ones that are not resistant. So they die out, and then the resistant ones remain. So over time, the resistant ones proliferate and start causing disease, and then you start spreading them around. You get what I mean? So without the antibiotic, you don't select. So if you have a cold, which is a virus, okay, and you take say amoxicillin, clavulanic acid, or
that's an antibiotic.
It's an antibiotic. You don't need it, but we have bacteria in our body, in our guts, natural. I mean, they are there. You are exposing them to these antibiotics, and you will be wiping out the ones that are susceptible and leaving out the ones that are resistant, and they would in turn probably cause an infection the next time. This is a big problem. It's a big, how do you call it?
Yeah, but
in your introduction.
Who has caused it?
I would say we are all responsible.
Usually when we go to the pharmacy and we say what we want instead of produce some prescription, is because we've had the doctor or we've seen the doctor prescribe it before.
Yes, but you are not a doctor. So the fact that you've seen a doctor prescribe before does not give you the right to go and buy it. That is why probably we should have had a policy. I'm sure we have a policy, but of course, probably it doesn't work. So the pharmacist is supposed to refuse you, like you saw on the insert. What you showed, this was a pharmacist who was refusing the customers. He was refusing to sell the antibiotics to his customers. However, close to his shop, there was a chemical seller who was selling the same agent. So we need to have a uniform policy. If you saw me prescribe an antibiotic to you and you wanted to buy it, of course the pharmacist should deny you, but we don't have that system working. So that's one problem. But as I said, it is a multifaceted problem. In the developing countries, they tend to use a lot of antibiotics in the in animal husbandry, and this has introduced a lot of antibiotics into meat products especially. And this is also contributing to antibiotic resistance, because a lot of bacteria that we have that cause disease in man are also found in animals. So using antibiotics in there also exposes the same bacteria to antibiotic pressure, and then resistance also evolves in them as well.
So what's the solution?
Well, just as the problems are multifaceted, we need a multifaceted approach to this as well. I mean, we need individuals to be aware that you cannot buy antibiotics without prescription. You need to see your doctor before you do that. We need policies as a nation to regulate something like that.
Okay, we'll continue with the policies, but the fact is, do we even understand that we're buying antibiotics when we ask for such drugs?
I think a lot of Ghanaians know when they are buying antibiotics. Probably the ordinary man on the street, lay person may not know, but most people know, because in my practice, patients will come to you and say, "Doc, me pay antibiotic," or "I want an antibiotic," or "I have a cold, I have a cough, I want antibiotic. Last time I had an antibiotic." So a lot of people know about antibiotics, and they know what they are taking.
Because I mean, if like common cold, cough, you don't need antibiotics, then why are we so used to that idea? Is it because we think that it would kill it faster?
Yes, I think that's a misconception people would have, that once you take the antibiotic, you would feel better. But if you really were to ask people a number of times that when they had a cold and a cough and they took the antibiotic, what was the outcome? They would tell you that it didn't really improve. Cough and cold usually we take their normal duration. So if it's a week, it's 2 weeks, and they will take their normal course before they go away. Yeah.
Okay. So you're talking about the solution. You were touching on policies.
Yeah. So it's, as I said, it's multifaceted. We need policies to protect the few antibiotics that we have. Policies that would and policies that are enforced. For example, preventing over-the-counter sale of antibiotics. We need a national policy on antibiotics. I think it's something that the ministry is seriously looking at now, so that we would have certain antibiotics that are restricted and how it's supposed to be used. And we need to monitor resistance as a nation so that we know which antibiotics we are losing. Okay, so we know, okay, these organisms are there, so we know the steps to put in place. Like malaria, they were monitoring malaria resistance. They got a certain percent point, they decided, no, chloroquine is not effective again, let's switch something else. So we need something like that, okay, in our system.
And in Ghana, I mean, how often do we do research?
Well, in the area of antibiotic resistance, I can tell you that there's a lot of research going on.
Oh, even in Ghana?
Yes, there's a lot of research, and if you go online, there's a lot of data out there. So I think there's a lot of research being done with regards to antibiotic resistance. There's currently a big one. I think it's ADMIR. It's a Ghanaian-sponsored program. I think with the University of Ghana Medical School, and they are doing quite a lot of work. So there's a lot of work going on with antibiotic resistance. So that's why. If you do your work, you realize that, I mean, WHO put I think in April, WHO published its first.
Yeah, what I read was coming from the 30th publication.
And if you look at that publication, you realize that when you look at the world map, where they've got the data in Africa, Ghana is not doing badly at all in the sense that we have a lot of data on antimicrobial resistance.
So what does it mean? What does it mean to a country? I mean, people are still going to.
Well, what it means is that you need to know the extent of the problem before you can actually put in interventions. So that means that now we know how bad it is in our country. So it requires that now we put in the various interventions. That's what it means. Yeah.
Okay. I think that, before I let you go, you would have to do a bit of education on what the microbiologists do.
Oh, what the microbiologists do. Okay. Well, there are not so many of us in the country anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, so a medical microbiologist, typically, you wouldn't see me in the clinic attending to patients on a day-to-day basis, but literally we work hand in hand with the clinicians in advising on the use of antibiotics, multi-drug resistant bacteria. We also work in the laboratory as well in looking at basically with working with bacteria, trying to isolate the organisms, trying to find out their resistance patterns, which antibiotics should go out, which antibiotics should stay, trying to rationalize the use of antibiotics, and also in diagnostics, microbiology diagnostics, and basically, that's what we do. Infectious diseases, helping clinicians.
Okay, so obviously this is a specialized area.
Yes, it's a specialized area,
okay.
Yes.
All right. So typically, what would you be suffering from before you be prescribed an antibiotic?
You need to have a bacterial infection. Okay, and of course, typically a clinician would take a history, and then from the history would have an idea. Okay, this patient has got an infection, probably let me use a urinary tract infection, for example. So a patient comes in and says, okay, I'm passing a lot of urine all of a sudden, and it's painful. I'm having pain when I pass urine. Probably I'm having a chill, so I'm having a fever. So clinician thinks about probably you have a urinary tract infection. So probably we'll order a blood urine test, okay, and then we'll give you some antibiotics. So that is a typical example. Or you'd have a boil. Okay, a boil is an infection, would require antibiotics. So it's not everything that requires antibiotics. There are specific infections that would require antibiotics. Yes.
Help us with the sort of impacts on HIV patients. Or STIs, if you like, broadly.
Well, with STIs, the major thing is right now is when it comes to gonorrhea, especially, where we are now beginning to see resistance to ceftriaxone, which is...
What's that?
It's an antibiotic.
Okay.
It's an antibiotic. It's the drug we use for treating gonorrhea. Okay. Before, we were using penicillin. Now we had a problem of resistance, quite a significant population of gonorrhea isolates became resistant to penicillin, so we decided to switch to ceftriaxone. Now we have reports of resistant strains of gonorrhea.
Is it the same? I mean, it comes back to the same thing, the way we use it?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think reports have been, there have been reports from Japan and a couple of other countries there. So that is something that's currently being looked at. There's a lot of research into gonorrhea that is resistant to ceftriaxone. When it comes to HIV, HIV is a virus, so necessarily antibiotics has nothing to do with it. But the other problem comes in with tuberculosis, because HIV and tuberculosis are closely linked. HIV lowers your immune system and allows opportunistic infections to come in, and TB is an opportunistic infection. Usually, would affect people who are immune compromised. So, problem we have with TB is also multi-drug resistance. It's also there because you use antibiotics in treating tuberculosis as well. So, the larger the population of HIV patients that you have, the more likelihood you have a lot more tuberculosis patients. HIV patients tend to have a lot of drugs. And in TB treatment takes 6 months minimum. 6 months of taking medications together with your anti-HIV drugs. So some of their patients...
So a lot of drugs at the same time.
A lot of patients do not comply if you don't supervise them. And non-compliance to antibiotics leads to the development of multi-drug resistance. And multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, once you develop it, it costs us so much more to treat them. And that is why we have to look at it, because the economic impact, we may not see it now, but it actually costs the health system a lot just to treat somebody who's got multi-drug resistant. And the fear now is we're actually approaching what people say is the pre-antibiotic era, where we'll get to a place whereby the antibiotics that we have will not work. And so before 1940s, 1920s, where when you can just go and deliver and then you could just get an infection and that would kill you.
So we saw this coming?
Well, yes.
We anticipated?
It was anticipated as far back as 1950.
Okay, but have we been prepared for it?
Well, as a people, I guess we've been complacent. But now I think the word is going out, and it looks like everybody is now becoming aware. WHO is taking the lead. If you go to Europe, the Centers for ECDC, that's the European Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they are trying to map out strategy. In America, they are doing. So I think for us in the developing world, it's time for us to also get our act together, because now it's a global world.
So the point is, if I have a sudden infection and then, it's caused by a bacteria, I could be taking an antibiotic and it may not be working.
Yep. That's the simple fact of that. And that is why the economic cost actually is increased, because instead of probably giving you something that you take that will probably in 2-3 days, now we have to probably admit you and use a higher generation drug. So for urinary tract infection, instead of probably giving you, I wouldn't want to name any names, but
sure.
Take it, you may then have to come probably and be given injections in the hospital, or probably a drug that is probably reserved for maybe infections in your blood may now have to be used for treating just a simple urinary tract infection, because all the common agents wouldn't work with you.
So how do I know that, a certain drug is not working for me?
You wouldn't know necessarily, but your infection wouldn't go away. Okay, I guess that's the way you would know, but your infection wouldn't go away. And so you'd keep on going back to your doctor to say, I'm not well.
And what is the doctor supposed to do? Because, usually when they give you, they can say, so you take this, try it for 7 days. If it doesn't work after 4 days, then you can report back to me.
Yes, so if it doesn't work, based on, for example, if it's your urine, they'll have to take a little bit of your urine, send it to the laboratory. That's where the first point, of course, so probably in the laboratory, I would see it. We would culture the organism, meaning that we will grow the organism in the laboratory in a controlled environment. We would test it against the routinely used antibiotics, and then we'd find out if it works. We have methods of checking whether the organism is susceptible or it's resistant. Then we report back to the clinician and say, look, your antibiotics A, B, and C are resistant. Antibiotics B, C, and D are okay for you to use. And then the clinician then decides to change whatever he or she was using.
Do all the hospitals do this? I mean, this is a fine process, but do they all do it? Because sometimes you go and see a doctor, they just listen to you, and then they just write something and give you.
Yes. I mean, I think all hospitals, not all hospitals have laboratories anyway, but I mean, there are laboratories all around. So they can give you a request form to go and perform the test and then bring the laboratory. So it is, I think the process, it's available to most hospitals. Probably in the very district or remote hospitals, they may not have laboratories available to perform such tests. But in most district and then regional hospitals, these facilities are available.
Yeah. Okay. So how soon or close are we to solving this resistance problem?
I don't think we are close to solving. I think we are now beginning to realize the extent of the problem, and now we are now beginning to think about how to solve the problem.
Oh, so we are thinking about it. It's not like we're solving it.
Yes, I would say we are thinking about it. As I said, we've done a lot of research. Now we know the extent of the problem. Now we have to find ways of going about it. Okay, and as I said, it's multifaceted. So we are going to try and see how we can develop new drugs, how we can keep what we have, and how we can prevent the spread of these organisms. So I think that's where we are at now. We are in Europe and some countries. I mean, they actually saw this coming a long time ago, because if you go to probably the Scandinavian countries, the whole of Europe, they have the lowest problem of antimicrobial resistance, because they've had a lot of policies. And if you look, studies have shown that they have the lowest per capita use of antibiotics in the whole of Europe. So that tells you that antibiotic usage is directly linked with antibiotic resistance.
Has it got anything to do directly with poverty?
I don't think it's necessarily, no.
Okay.
Not necessarily. I mean, you can push it, but not necessarily, because I think it's a problem worldwide. In Europe, they are facing the same problem. It's a matter of you not putting in interventions. So once you don't have the interventions, I guess you develop it. But once you have it, I don't think it's a matter of poverty at all.
Do you know if we get any direct funding from governments? Because you mentioned, is it the medical school in Dunedin?
Yeah.
You know, and I know that sometimes we rely a lot on WHO as well. Should we be making provision for that, and can we afford to? Because it takes a lot of money to do these things.
For research, you mean research? Yeah. I guess for research purposes, as a country, I think because
the last time I checked, no, we just rely on
yes,
donors.
But most, I mean, with the little experience that I have, most research that we do in this country are donor funded. Or
is that good enough?
No, that's not good enough, because I think that we should, because we know where we have our problems, and we need to conduct research into those areas, so we need to fund them. But I guess it comes back to a matter of probably no money, or maybe priorities or stuff. So yeah, but most research in this country is actually donor funded. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just looking at the WHO reports, and I've gotten to ways to fight antibiotic resistance. So until we find a permanent solution to it, until then, what should we do, ordinary persons?
As an ordinary person, my advice to you will be, I mean, if you think you are ill, see your doctor and the doctor will determine whether to give you antibiotics or not, or will give you the appropriate therapy, what you need. So I think that's the most important thing as an individual. That's the take-home message as for individuals. Yeah.
So reading this, I get it. One of the other things I get is the fact that we start taking the drug, and then when we feel that we are better, we stop. We don't complete it.
Yes, that's one of the contributing factors. That's one of the contributing factors. As I said, suboptimal doses. Once the organisms are in there and you don't finish the treatment, initially I said you would wipe out the most susceptible ones, and the resistant ones will remain. So if you are given a course to be taken over 1 week, and you take it for 3 days and you feel you are fine, you may have wiped out about probably 90% of the organisms, but you have about a 10%. So within the next probably 2 weeks, those 10 or 20% would multiply again, and most likely these organisms will not respond to the same antibiotic that was used previously. Yes.
Okay, another thing that I need clarification on, you're saying that, and I don't mean you, but that's what the WHO is saying, that if I use a drug, if I use an antibiotic and I finish, but I have some of the drugs left, I shouldn't pass on to someone else.
Yes.
So don't give somebody your leftovers.
Because you are not a doctor. And whatever ailment you had is not what the other person may be having.
What if the symptoms are the same?
Yes, but the organisms may not be the same. For example, I'll come back to urinary tract infection again. You have a urinary tract infection caused by E. coli. So the doctor gives you one antibiotic. Somebody has another organism, Proteus. It's another bacteria, by the way. And that organism, the resistance profile probably is way different from yours. You cannot extrapolate and then use your antibiotic. So it's actually something that is not advised at all. But it's a practice a lot of people, a lot of Ghanaians would do, because you would see somebody, my daughter was sick, and then I had a leftover of this drug and I started, or the anti-malarials, and that's what I would ask them, how come you still have remnants? Because you were given so and so supposed to take for 1 week, so how come you have remnants? But of course, as you said.
So what if I used it, but I couldn't finish all, but I finished the course and I have some leftovers? Can I always go back to it?
Antibiotics are prescribed for a set duration.
So you will never have leftovers?
If you adhere to your doctor's instructions, you are supposed to finish it.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Strictly?
Yes.
Okay.
Because there's a timeline for treating any infection.
Okay. All right. So I guess always go back to the doctor.
Yes. When it comes to antibiotics.
When it comes to okay. But of course, you would not know if you need antibiotics until you have it checked out.
Okay.
But the point is, can we all go to the hospital? Can the hospitals afford to take all of us? Because I know that sometimes the pharmacies also, do some bit of work.
Yes, the pharmacists do some bit of work, but as you realize with what the pharmacist said, with antibiotics, it's not supposed to be sold over the counter. Okay? And there's, unlike something like malaria, where we say do the RDT, of course, because we can give the RDT kits to pharmacies where they can do it quickly and say, okay, it's malaria, so take an anti-malarial. We don't have anything like that with bacterial infections. So the best thing would be to see your doctor. I think we have enough health facilities to be able to take care of people in this country. Yes, we have challenges, but I think we should be able to go to the hospital. We have enough hospitals to take care of people. I don't think it's a problem of, we cannot justify.
But a lot of people also use herbal medicines.
Yeah.
Are they interfering in this process in any way?
I cannot say. I cannot say that, because I don't have any evidence or anything like that, so I cannot comment on herbal medications and antimicrobial resistance. But yes, I can't really say. But most drugs are gotten from.
Because the pharmacists, and this is what we played earlier, was talking about a mixture of some antibiotic with some herbal medicine. What a doctor would typically not prescribe herbal medicine, and some and some other thing for you.
No. What I know, some unscrupulous people would have herbal concoctions, and in those concoctions they will put probably some known antimicrobial agents in there and then sell it for various things and claim that, of course, our herbs are this and that and that, but of course they know what they've put inside it. So yes, those things do occur and those things may contribute, but the interaction between herbal preparations and antimicrobial agents, I'm not sure necessarily with.
Okay. So just the points again, something that we can always remember from the doctor.
Yes, with antimicrobial resistance, with antibiotics, when you are ill, I think the first thing is to see your doctor. That is the primary thing. Do not take antibiotics from a friend, or do not buy antibiotics from Mokola. And when you are giving antibiotics, finish your course. If you are not feeling well, go back to your doctor, and then you'll be investigated appropriately.
All right, so that's the doctor's advice. What have I got to say afterwards? Thank you very much to you, Mr. Apialabi, for your time. Really, thank you. No, did you say something?
You said Mr.
Oh, yeah, I did. Sorry. How could I forget? Dr. Labi has been my guest. We've been talking about antibiotics, the fact that now I know, because before I was saying we're resisting, but it's not us, it's the bacteria. Okay, so until we get a permanent solution, please remember the pointers, the tidbits.